Awesome. I think we're started. Here we go. Cool. Hello, I'm Aaron. I'm here with the rest of the Azure PowerShell, or some of the rest of the Azure PowerShell team, and a few members of some of the other teams that we work with on Azure PowerShell. So this is our community stand-up for the 4.3.0 release, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But first up, we have some of our colleagues from Event Hubs and Service Bus here to talk about new improvements to some of the commandlets that they've made recently. So Ajit and Arun, I'll pass it off to you and show us what you got.
Hey Aaron, hey community. So we are from the Azure Service Bus and Azure Event Hub and Azure Relay team. So with this release of the PowerShell, we have made it's based on a newer API version, which has a bunch of performance and reliability improvements. So that we've been making on the RP for the past few months. So that should definitely translate to the .NET clients and the PowerShell that was released. Also, with this new release for Service Bus, we have support for the resource called Rules, which allows you to set custom filtering on subscriptions on your topics. And for Event Hubs, we added support for the new feature called Capture, which allows you to group your events sent to the Event Hub into chunks, which can be sent into which are uploaded into your storage account for delayed batch processing. So,
is that kind of like debouncing an event, let's say?
It's more of multiplexing a bunch of events and batching them to batch processing by. So a lot of use cases for Event Hub involve streaming data into the Event Hub, collecting them into a batch, and sending it to your batch processing systems for delayed processing. So Event Hub, before we had this feature called Capture, folks used to create have a VM role running that does this multiplexing of events for you and batching of events for you. Now you do not need to do that anymore. Just turn on this feature called Capture, provide your storage account, and the blobs are aggregated and put into your storage account for processing.
Cool.
We use a format called Avro, which there are Avro parsers, which is a community format, non-proprietary Microsoft. So a bunch of parsers to use Avro so that you can consume the batched events too. Along with that, we also made we added a new generic commandlets for things called authorization rules, which is how you set custom access policies on your queues, topics, or Event Hubs. So we used to have many PowerShell commandlets on each resource type for authorization rules. Based on community feedback, we decided to create generic versions of these, which can be applied to namespaces, queues, topics, or Event Hubs. So the old ones are marked as obsolete, and we have added new generic ones. And when at a future time, we'll probably remove the obsolete ones. But for now, both are supported.
Awesome. Very cool. Mark or Cormac, do you guys have any questions? Leading questions?
No, I just want to say that the design change they had here was awesome. It was a great.
Agreed.
Great that we get that community feedback, especially from our PowerShell MVPs. And this is one place where we took that feedback and we actually put it into action in this release. And you should be seeing a lot more of that going forward. And the Service Bus, Event Hubs, Notification Hubs, Relay team has been really responsive to this stuff. So kudos to them for doing that.
Awesome. Cool, guys. Anything else to add?
No, those are things from our side. We love to hear your feedback, and we're definitely listening, looking at the feedback channels to make improvements, and this is some area that we're constantly going to invest in. So yeah, keep your feedback coming.
Good. That's actually a good segue to a later topic. Please use the Azure PowerShell send feedback command. I occasionally go through all of the feedback and then send it on to the partner team. So please send feedback in Azure PowerShell. However, if you find any issues or other feature requests, you can also file an issue on GitHub, which both Ajit and Arun will get accordingly.
For sure.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. I think we're gonna move on to some storage improvements that have been made as well. One of our engineers, Wei, made some videos for me, and I get to talk through them just by having watched them a few times. So storage team has made some two pretty cool improvements here. Mostly they're features, but they've made their way down to Azure PowerShell. And now I just need to figure out how to share my screen properly. There we go. Okay. So the first demo is customer managed keys and storage. So she sets up a few variables here. You'll see. We're going to get the storage account, and you'll see a property identity, and it's empty. So this is probably a newish storage account. And then she is going to assign an identity to that storage account. And then we'll notice when we get the storage account, there's an identity object. And then we also have a principal ID associated with that identity using the account that we passed in. Wow, I need some inflection, don't I, guys? So then we're going to get a key vault. Let's try to make it exciting here. And we're going to grab the. So you kind of need some orchestration here. We need the vault URI, and basically.
Just to totally blow the cliffhanger here, what's going to happen at the end is they're going to encrypt this storage account using a key stored in Key Vault.
Yeah, you just blew the cliffhanger, Mark. How could you? Yeah, so that's a good point. We should have just come out the gate. What we're really doing is assigning an identity to the storage account and then encrypting that storage account using that identity with a key in the key vault assigned to that identity as well. So you'll see here we're also getting the permission to the keys so that we can assign them.
Yeah. So basically, this whole thing around managed service identity allows us to give an AAD, like an identity, a service principal, to specific objects in PowerShell, or sorry, not in PowerShell, in Azure. And that allows us to give them privileges to do things like, in this case, read a key out of Key Vault so that I can encrypt myself using that key.
Exactly.
So you'll see this as a theme that's starting to appear in lots of Azure services.
Yep.
It's a way that you can basically give permissions to Azure services to do things that will cross that will cross sort of resource boundaries. Allow you to manage what their privileges are. So it's pretty cool. It allows you to do these really neat hybrid scenarios, like, say, manage your storage account keys through Key Vault, manage your storage encryption through Key Vault. And there will be many more cool things coming up in later releases having to do with this feature as it rolls out.
That's even more of a cliffhanger.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, she's showing off the fact that the permissions were set on the key in the Key Vault. Now we're going to go back to the storage account, and you'll see that she's passing in the Key Vault URI and also passing a flag saying that we want to use Key Vault encryption on this storage account. Okay, so now when we check out encryption up there, that actually has changed. So she's going to, I believe she's going to double click down into the Key Vault properties. There we go. So now we see that the Key Vault from that Key Vault URI that we had just edited for permissions has been set to this storage account so that it's encrypted using that Key Vault key. So that's the first one. I've got another one here. Oh, there's my desktop. And this is another kind of theme, another cliffhanger that will blow, I guess, where there's going to be a lot more networking interaction. So you'll see that we actually have a networking rule set for storage, and you notice that it was all empty. So now she's just going to keep on adding rules here. So we have some rules to allow some IP address ranges in. So those two were added to the rule. Then we're also going to add virtual network resource IDs to this network rule as well, storage account network rule. So you'll see that's changed as well. We have virtual network rules. And most of this demo is about the different ways you can do this. So most of these ones we're updating. So now we also see that the default action is to deny, and then just that address range and just those VNets have been added for allow. You can also get a rule set and then add rules to that rule set, very similar to something you might do on a NSG, where you can get the NSG and then add rules to it. So in this case, she's getting the rule, then adding either IP address ranges or VNet rules to the storage account network rule object. So same thing here.
So, but basically, the idea is that I believe is that this is limiting access to things in storage based on where the requests are coming from.
Mark, just blowing all of my cliffhangers.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I basically set you up for it because I was like, if I just keep on talking through this, Mark's gonna chime in. It's gonna be awesome.
I'm like the guy at the movie everybody throws popcorn at, because I let them know what the ending is.
Yeah, just reveal the secret. You wouldn't be the best writer. Those are my least favorite writers. Writers that give you illusions to things and then immediately blow the illusion in the very next sentence. It's cool. So that's exactly right. What we're really doing here is restricting or allowing or so on and so forth access. So now here's another one. I'll go ahead and pause it here so we see what happens. This is also to do it kind of all at once. We can pass in all of these kind of configuration objects to update a rule set all at once. So we have kind of default action is deny, and then we have this IP address or range added, this IP address or range added, and then these network rules added.
So this is just a classic. This is just a classic network whitelist.
Yeah,
we deny everything or an allow list, I want to say.
Yeah,
So
and a classic allow list where most everything is denied except for the rules that we passed in. Very similar to an NSG, it's typically deny and then you allow the ports or the IP address ranges you want. And like
similar,
Mark, sorry, go ahead.
You could do a block list.
Exactly.
By doing the opposite sort of thing. By having default allow and then
Yeah. And so, like Mark said, the entire point is to basically further secure your storage account by, say, masking the address range to your corpnet or something like that, so that you can only have IPs, or maybe there's only one VM on the face of the earth that should be allowed to access your storage account. You can just deny everything and only allow the IP address of that, or maybe a range of IPs for virtual machines. So then at the very end here, we take that storage account network rule set and we apply it to the storage account. So now our storage account is protected. So we could say, since this is, like you said, an allow list where the default action is deny and then we allow certain IPs. You guys have any comments there? I think, Mark, you did a perfect job of explaining why this is important. Anything else? I can't hear you guys if you're talking.
Oh no, we're not.
You're just.
We've said enough.
Okay. Mark, you know I'm kidding. I totally loved the cliffhangers that you blew. It's just amazing. So thank you to Wei for pulling together this demo. She came through pretty quickly. I pinged her, I think, yesterday. She's in China, and she got it to me last night sometime, probably around 3 a.m. Pacific time. So thank you, Wei, again, for providing the demo. It really helps us show off all the cool new features that we have in Azure PowerShell, and then by extension, all of the cool new features that we have in Azure as a whole. So,
and I should add that just recently, the storage module went over 1 million downloads. In the PowerShell galleries. That just happened a couple of weeks ago. So that's pretty awesome. We're pretty excited about that. We just went over 2 million downloads. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Modules from the gallery.
Yes, I think many of the Azure ones are in the top 10. How many of them are there? Maybe 9, 8 of the top 10.
We have 40 some. We have a little over 40 modules, and I believe that they're all in the top 50. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a good call out, Mark. Congrats to the storage team. Awesome work on their PowerShell commandlets, and the fact that it's one of the most downloaded makes it even cooler that they can say they're one of the heavy hitters in the PowerShell scene, I guess you could say. Do we want to talk about anything else in terms of other features that were delivered this release? Mark? Not.
So we have some things later on that we were going to talk about. So particularly, I mean, the big thing that people hopefully won't notice, but we should tell them about, is that we're turning on data collection by default.
Yeah.
Now. So when I say you won't notice, we actually print a warning to tell you that we now have it on by default, and the same commandlets that you could use before to turn it off and turn it on still work. But the idea is that we really want to use your information to improve the experience that everybody's having with Azure PowerShell. And so that's why we've made this. This is a big push for us to be able to use data better in making your experience better. So if you don't feel comfortable with sharing data, you can go ahead and disable. But just know that by default, when you install now, the data collection is going to be enabled. And we never collect PII. So we're very careful about not collecting information that can be traced back to a specific person or computer or anything like that. So we're careful about that. But you should know that hopefully this will make the experience get better over time.
Exactly. I think that's the major point. We found that we get a lot of value out of our client-side telemetry, and we feel like we get even more value if we were opt-in by default, or sorry, if people were sending telemetry by default, because most people don't mind, and then that way we can take that data and make improvements to the product, which is our end goal. Do we have anything that we want to talk about in terms of automation changes recently?
So I think we wanted to talk a little bit. This would be a good segue into us talking about our boo-boo this release. So we released 4.3.0 very briefly last week, and there was immediately an issue with Azure Automation. As a lot of you probably know who use Azure Automation, you can very easily, with the click of a button, update your Azure modules as soon as they're available. A lot of people take advantage of that. And they were immediately seeing some problems. It was because there were some signing issues with a couple of new DLLs that were in the release. So we, not quickly enough, but relatively quickly, pulled that release back. And then we did we put some things into place in our pipeline to ensure that that doesn't happen again. And basically, it took us a few days to get our release pipeline squared away so that we were really happy with it. And then we released 4.3.1 yesterday. We've already had over 20,000 downloads of it, I believe. So people noticed that we released it. It doesn't have that issue. And also, as we were fixing the release pipeline, we found a couple of minor issues that we
figured we might as well address.
So people, especially people using us on like Windows, still using PowerShell 3, for those of you who for some reason are not using PowerShell 5, you'll see some improvements. But yeah, there's a big mea culpa. We should not have released that. You should know that we put things in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. And part of the reason why it took a little bit of time to release again is because we wanted to make sure the release pipeline was in order, so that we wouldn't have a repeat of this. So,
yep.
Anyway, mea culpa. Hopefully, the last mea culpa for this.
Yeah, hopefully for this specific type of issue, it's the last one.
Yeah, I think the other good thing that came out of that part of our release pipeline now is actually doing things with Azure Automation so that people don't see these service issues. So
yeah,
we should not see these kinds of day zero issues in Azure Automation again after this.
awesome. And I think we also wanted to talk a little bit about context persistence. And I feel like I'm just throwing you under the bus, Mark, because this has been a pretty busy week for all of us. Did you have anything you wanted to?
I have a demo to show. I have a demo to show on context persistence. So
yes.
Let me talk. So this isn't the whole thing, but I'll be able to show some of it. So the idea.
One of you bumped your video, and now you guys are. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay, we're going to a different computer. You guys are muted, by the way. Friends.
Okay, so
And then now we've got some echo.
and then how's that?
Yeah, that should work. Nope. Nope. So I would mute Cormac's machine and then go back to talking through your machine, Mark. Or the... Or no, I would mute Mark's machine and then unmute Cormac's. Yeah, how's that? Yep.
Okay.
And you guys want to fix the camera? Yeah, we can see your feed.
So my screen is showing up.
Correct. Yep, there we go. Cool.
Okay, so we've been talking about context persistence for quite a bit of time, and we have the context persistence commandlets just about ready to go out for preview. Because this is such a big change, we kind of wanted to make these commandlets available to some people to look at before we put them out as part of a major release. So we expect to release these going out with our release in September, which is the next release is on September 25th. But I wanted to show these, and then in a few days we'll make this a link available so that people can download the packages associated with this and get a chance to look at this themselves. So basically, yesterday I logged into a couple different accounts, and I'm going to use context persistence to do this. So one thing I can do to start out with is I can just look at the current context. You can see that I didn't have to log in. I just opened this window and I have a context that's pointing at this particular account. And I can just use it to say, get the resource groups. And that just works. So basically it's using my cache tokens and my cache context. If I open up another window, it'll do the same thing. I'll show that in a minute. So great, we're able to do that. The other thing that we can do is we actually enable you to cache a few contexts. So for example, and select between them. So I can, we have a new commandlet to select the context. So I can say select Azure RM context, and give me just a second. And basically I can tab through the contexts that are available to me. You'll see this kind of first context is a little wonky. It's one that's just based on I didn't name it, so it just has the user ID and the subscription ID. But then I have a context for my home account. I have a context for Node, which is one of my work accounts. So I'm going to choose my home account, but I don't want that to be like the default that I use all the time. So for all of these commandlets that make changes like this, we have this new parameter called scope, and I can say. And I can say scope current user, which makes the change across any sessions this user starts, or I can say scope process, and that means I'm just selecting the context for the current PowerShell process. So I'm going to say scope process, and then you can see it changed the context, and now I'm logged in as a different person, pointing at a different subscription, and I can say get Azure RM resource group, and I'm going to get an entirely different set of resource groups for that context. Now, meanwhile, if I open up a new PowerShell window and I say get Azure RM context. Because I only made that change to the local process, in this one, I go back to that context that I had chosen last time. And so we have a bunch of commands in here for manipulating context, and I don't want to take up too much time with this. But for example, I had that kind of funnily, that context that was named kind of strangely. So I can do rename Azure RM context. I can pipe and find that context. And then I want to say, I want to give it a new target name, and I want to call it work1, for example. And that's going to rename the context. And now if I say, select the context here, I can tab through, well, I have one called home, I have one called node, I have one called work1. And I can go ahead and select that context. You can see that I'm using that context now. So that's pretty much what I was going to show this time. You're going to be able to remove contexts. You're going to be able to log out. And then, of course, you're going to be able to opt out of this feature. So by default, context will be saved because we think that's what most people are going to want. But you will be able to opt out of this feature, and you'll also be able to control, if you do save the context, where it's saved. By default, it's going into an ACLed directory inside your user directory. But you will be able to control that, to put it in a different place if you want to. So that's my demo.
Awesome. I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited, Mark.
So like I said, we'll post a link to go with the video later, where you can, if you want to use these commands for a little bit and provide some feedback, we'll post a link there, and we'll also have an issue that you can comment on, or you can always send us things via send feedback about what you think about these commandlets and how you would change them if you want to change them, or if you like them.
Awesome. So I think the next thing we wanted to show off a little bit was the fact that we now have preview versions of .NET Core based modules, and I think a lot of times we don't maybe describe this super well, but PowerShell 6 is being built with .NET Core support, so that PowerShell 6 can be run on Windows, Mac, or Linux, and any other operating system that they choose to support. .NET Core can target tons of different distributions. So what that means is that we also need to ship Azure PowerShell modules that are .NET Core compatible. In that case, we announced before that we had .NET SDK for Azure was moved over to .NET Core, and so now we're moving some of our modules over to .NET Core as well, so you can run them from Azure PowerShell in Mac or Linux. So I really real quickly wanted to show off that fact here. We've got. Need to share my screen again here. So yeah, if you go to the gallery and you search for Azure RM.NET Core, you'll see this one right here, and this is the one we're talking about. And as you'll see, we have compute network storage and websites, and then some of the base. So we have profile and tags. Some of kind of the core functionality of Azure PowerShell. Please be sure to check this out. Let us know what you think. We'll be adding more and more functionality over time. But we kind of wanted to let you know that it's out there, it's available, and you can check it out. In addition, we also started shipping Docker images for Azure PowerShell. So if you check out Azure SDK, we have two different ones, Azure PowerShell and then also Azure PowerShell Core. So the Azure PowerShell Docker images are based on Windows Server Core. So they are fairly large, but that's because we want these to be compatible on Windows. So if you're running Docker for Windows using Windows containers, then you need to use Windows Server Core for the full Azure PowerShell experience. Nano Server, the smaller one, it's like 400 megabytes, can only support PowerShell 6. So we wanted a full container. We wanted a full Docker container of all of Azure PowerShell. And so that's this one built on Windows Server Core. And you'll see we started doing that with 4.1 a few months ago. We also started taking that same Azure PowerShell based on .NET Core that I just showed you and pumping out some Docker images there as well. We're not versioning it intensely right now. As soon as we start with 1.0 plus version numbers, I'll start versioning that accordingly. But we have a latest version based on Ubuntu, and then we also have a Nano Server version based on Nano Server, obviously. So that same module, AzureRM.NET Core, if you're looking for a Docker image with those modules in it, say you're on Linux and you want to run a Linux VM, you can use the latest image here. And if you're on Windows and you just want the smaller functionality of the Azure PowerShell core, you could use the Nano Server image that we have up here. So those are two kind of new cool things. One of the things that I love about Docker is just the fact that I can hit the ground running pretty quickly. So you just Docker run, and most people pass -it, and then you have Azure PowerShell already running, ready to go. If you want, you could add to it. You could, like Mark just did, you could save your profile to an image and then tag that image locally and then use that if you wanted to. So what'd you say, Mark?
Nothing. I think that it's awesome having those Docker images out there. They make it really easy for people to take a look at the new stuff without having to go do all that old-fashioned installing things.
That's true. The other thing that we probably should mention here before we move on is you may have noticed that in the portal there is a beta version of Azure PowerShell in the Cloud Shell. So you have to do a little bit of sign-up steps and things like that if you want to try it out in the portal. But part of that effort in the portal is actually based on Docker images. So this doesn't directly impact that effort, but we're trying to be part of this same pipeline so that the same Azure PowerShell that you download through the gallery is the same Azure PowerShell that you would get in the Cloud Shell, just like the same CLI that you get in the through what's it called, PyPy, is the same CLI you get in the Cloud Shell. So cool. Should we move on to the last few things, guys?
Yeah, there's one thing. So in my demo, I totally whiffed on presenting one thing.
Oh.
Which is that part of the context persistence that we get by default is that you can now use start job with any of our commandlets. So part of my awesome demo was supposed to be, hey, here's start job with one of our commandlets, and then look, you can do receive job and get all the results. But you'll just have to trust me, that actually works. You can do that. So you can do it by default because your context is persisted. So that means that when you start a new process, it's just using that persisted context.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going to be part of this when we push it out for you guys to take a look at is that you'll be able to actually pass in a context. So you can serialize it out to that thing, and that means that you can run a job like on a different subscription, or just specify the subscription. So you could have multiple different ones running in different contexts on the machine, and that will all work. So we should be, a lot of these, the long running operations and that kind of stuff will be way easier to use. Instead of like waiting around for your template to deploy, you can just do it as a job and then do the other stuff you have to do in your script, and then in the end wait and receive the job when you actually need the template to be done deploying.
Yeah. Awesome. I feel like we've been leaving Cormac out. What's up, Cormac? How's it going?
Good.
What did you do this release? I know the answer. I'm just prodding.
The main thing that I worked on was just getting our common dependencies project in order, moving forward, so that we can do preview modules coming up. So just making sure everybody's depending on one common target and getting all the dependencies there, which will help with the runtime changes that we're making for preview modules coming up in the next couple weeks or so.
Awesome. So that actually segues into the topic that I was going to bring up next, which is experiments. I think maybe last month or the month before, I talked about some of the new designs that we're looking at for Azure PowerShell. I actually ran some interviews. Many of you joined in those interviews. Many of you viewing the community stand-up joined me in an interview, which was a lot of fun. But now we're kind of taking the next step, and we want to leverage some of our work for preview modules. That is modules that can sit. I almost screwed that word up there. Modules that can sit on top of Azure RM that provide additional or different or experimental functionality. And that's kind of two-pronged. We've talked about this in the past. It's to reduce breaking changes so that teams can try out new features without introducing breaking changes into the stable Azure RM package. And it's also to get feedback. So we plan on leveraging some of this work in shipping some preview modules around the end of September, so that we can have you, our most dedicated users, try them out, let us know what you think, and then I will also be running a whole nother round of interviews. I'll be looking at any send feedback that we get. I'll be running interviews, and then we'll also be taking feedback over email or any other mechanism for some of the experiments that we're running. So the preview modules is a great segue into that, and so Cormac's work is directly supporting some of the work that we're trying to do around improving Azure PowerShell as a whole, in terms of making it easier to use and just generally more, I guess, fun to use. Any other comments there, guys, on experiments? Awesome. Again, send feedback. Send -feedback. Open up PowerShell right now, wherever you are, and do it. We're getting a lot of good feedback on GitHub issues. So please keep that coming. Some of the contributions from the community have fallen off a little bit. So we want to continue to encourage all of you to please, if you have contributions that you want to make and you're feeling hesitant about making those contributions for whatever reason, don't. We will check out your PRs. We will help get new features and new functionality in. So please contribute wherever you see an opportunity to. We would love it and appreciate it. And then, as always, continue to provide feedback in issues as well. If you find issues or if you find missing features, please let us know. File issues on GitHub.
Yeah. So I just to talk about that a little bit. We had for months, we were seeing lots and lots of people coming in and fixing our help, which did doing contributions to fix help, and that was great. I think one of the barriers to people doing contributions into our repo right now is that a lot of people who are really, really good at PowerShell don't necessarily feel comfortable as C# developers, and most of our code is in C#. One of the things that you'll see with these experiments as they go in is that we're doing them actually in PowerShell script. So this may be more of an opportunity for people to actually be able to do contributions that are more substantive, that they feel more comfortable with. We have had great contributions in the C#. I'm just letting people know that more stuff is going to be script based. So this will be more of an opportunity for you to actually contribute things that you may feel comfortable with. If you're like a PowerShell guru,
yeah,
you'll be more comfortable with this stuff as it's going forward. So watch out for that, and we look for and encourage your contributions.
Indeed, we do. All right, cool. Anything else, guys? Awesome. Hearing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for either watching live or watching after the fact on YouTube. We really appreciate your continued support and I guess support in terms of giving us feedback, letting us know what you like, what you don't like. We're trying to make the product as best as we can, and we want your involvement as much as you would like to be involved. Thanks, guys. I will see you when I get into the office.
All right, thanks. Send feedback.
Yes, please.